My wife said I am not cutting off my ex just because you are insecure. Fair point, I said. I accepted Amsterdam, the position I had declined 3 times for her. She realized I was serious when she showed up at our apartment to work things out. The new tenant answered the door. The pasta was getting cold. I watched the steam rise from Emily's plate, curling into nothing, the way trust does when you stop feeding it. She hadn't looked up from her phone in 7 minutes. I know because I counted each one, the way you count the seconds between lightning and thunder to measure how close the storm is. Lucas texted, she said finally, her voice bright in that particular way that made my chest tighten. He's having a rough time with the promotion stuff at work. Lucas. Always Lucas. Her ex-boyfriend of 4 years. The one she'd dated before me, throughout college and 2 years after. The one whose name appeared on her screen more often than mine did, even though we'd been married for 3 years. That's the 3rd time this week, I said quietly, twirling my fork through the linguine I'd spent an hour making from scratch. The recipe her mother had given me, the one Emily said reminded her of home. She looked up then, and I saw it, that flash of defensiveness that had become as familiar as her morning coffee order. He's going through something, Daniel. I'm not going to abandon a friend just because I'm not asking you to abandon anyone. Aren't you? She set her phone face down on the table, the universal signal that this conversation was about to go somewhere neither of us wanted. Because that's what it sounds like. Every time his name comes up, you get this tone. If you've ever been in a relationship where you're constantly told you're imagining things, you know that tone she meant. The one that implies you're crazy, insecure, making something out of nothing. The one that makes you question your own reality. Emily, I said, setting down my fork with the kind of care you use when handling something that might shatter. He calls you at 11 p.m. He texts you good morning before I'm even awake. Last week, you canceled our anniversary dinner reservation because he needed to talk through some things after his date didn't work out. It wasn't about the date. His mom is sick. His mom has been sick for 6 months, and somehow you're the only person who can comfort him about it. I took a breath, trying to keep my voice level, the way the marriage counselor had suggested. Calm, rational, non-accusatory. I'm not asking you to cut him off. I'm asking for boundaries. That's not insecurity. That's respect. She laughed. Actually laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that landed like a slap. Boundaries? Daniel, you want me to stop being friends with someone I've known for over a decade because you can't handle that I have a past. That's literally the definition of insecurity. The word hung between us like a verdict. Insecure. The accusation she wielded whenever I brought up Lucas, as if my discomfort with their relationship was a character flaw rather than a reasonable response to her spending more emotional energy on her ex than her husband. I looked at her across the table, this woman I'd built a life with, who I'd moved across the country for when she got her dream job in Boston, who I'd supported through her father's death, and her career pivots and every anxiety-riddled 3 a.m. crisis. The woman who'd promised me on our wedding day that I was her person now, and she was choosing him. Again. You know what? I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You're right. She blinked, caught off guard. She'd been gearing up for a fight, I could tell. Her shoulders were already set in that defensive posture, her jaw tight. I am insecure, I continued, meeting her eyes. I'm insecure about being second place in my own marriage. I'm insecure about my wife prioritizing another man's feelings over mine. You're absolutely right to call it what it is. Daniel, but here's the thing, Em. You get to choose how you want to live your life, and so do I. I stood up, leaving my plate untouched. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in the way they do when you realize you've been living in a space that doesn't fit you anymore. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, but her voice had changed. There was something uncertain in it now, a crack in the confidence. I walked to the bedroom, our bedroom, though it had started feeling like just hers somewhere along the way, and pulled out the folder I'd hidden in my nightstand drawer. The one I'd been looking at every night for the past 2 weeks, trying to convince myself not to open it, not to even consider it. When I came back to the dining room, she was standing now too, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. I set the folder on the table between us, right next to her cold pasta. "Amsterdam," I said simply. Her face went pale. "No, Daniel, we talked about this. You turned that down 3 times. I turned it down for you 3 times because you said Boston was where you needed to be, where your career was, where your life was, and I loved you enough to make that sacrifice." "Loved?" The word came out as a whisper. "Love," I corrected, though even as I said it, I wasn't entirely sure anymore. Present tense. But love isn't supposed to be this one-sided, Emily. Love isn't supposed to make you feel like you're constantly begging for scraps of attention from your own wife. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "This is emotional blackmail. You're trying to manipulate me into what? Treating our marriage like a priority? If that's manipulation, then I don't know what we're doing here." The folder sat between us like a confession. Inside it was everything. The job offer from Hartman and Associates, one of the most prestigious architectural firms in Europe. The position I'd dreamed about since graduate school. The salary that was nearly double what I made now. The apartment they'd helped me find in Jordan. The neighborhood I'd fallen in love with during my interview trip. The life I'd said no to because she'd cried and said she couldn't leave Boston, couldn't leave her job, couldn't start over, couldn't leave Lucas. She didn't say that last part, but I heard it anyway, in the silences between her reasons, in the way she'd brightened up the moment I'd agreed to stay. "When?" she asked finally. "They need an answer by Monday. The position starts in 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Daniel, you can't just..." She was pacing now, her hands shaking. "This is insane. You're throwing away our marriage because I won't cut off a friend?" "I'm not throwing anything away," I said, and I meant it. "I'm picking it up. I'm picking up the pieces of myself that I've been leaving behind every time I chose you over my own dreams, my own needs, my own self-respect." The silence that followed was the kind that rewrites history. I could see her processing it, trying to find the angle that would make me the villain, the one who was abandoning her, being unreasonable, proving her point about my insecurity. But for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't care how she framed it. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, my college roommate who'd moved to Rotterdam 5 years ago. "Dude, Amsterdam is incredible. You'd be stupid not to take it. Whatever's holding you back, it's not worth it." I looked at Emily, really looked at her, at the woman who'd become a stranger while I was too busy trying to save us to notice. "I'm not asking you to come with me," I said quietly. "I already know the answer to that." Her eyes filled with tears, but they felt performative somehow, like she was playing the part of the wounded wife rather than actually being wounded. "I just need you to understand something," I continued. "I didn't decline that position 3 times because I didn't want it. I declined it because I wanted you more. But I'm done wanting someone who doesn't want me back the same way." I walked to the door, grabbed my jacket. "Where are you going?" Her voice cracked. "Marcus's place. I need to think." "Daniel, please. We can talk about this. We can work it out. I'll set better boundaries with Lucas. I promise." It was the promise I'd been waiting months to hear. The words that might have saved us if they'd come sooner. If they'd come without the threat of me leaving. If they'd come because she valued our marriage instead of because she was afraid of losing her safety net. I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. "The thing about boundaries, Em, they only work if you want them. And you don't want them. You want me to be okay with things I'm not okay with. You want me to shrink myself small enough that there's room for both me and him in your life. And you want to call my refusal to do that insecurity." I opened the door. "Fair point," I said, echoing her earlier words back to her. "You're not cutting him off just because I'm insecure. And I'm not staying just because you're comfortable." The door closed softly behind me, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. The response email took me 4 days to write. Not because I didn't know what to say. I'd known the moment I walked out of our apartment what my answer would be. But because once I hit send, there would be no pretending anymore. No more, "We're just going through a rough patch." No more, "Marriage takes work." No more lying to myself that things would magically improve if I just tried harder, loved better, asked for less. I sat in Marcus's spare bedroom, laptop balanced on my knees, cursor blinking in the subject line like a heartbeat. Through the thin walls, I could hear him on a video call with his girlfriend, their laughter easy and unforced. The kind of laughter Emily and I used to share, back before every conversation became a negotiation. Subject: Senior Architect Position, Amsterdam Office. Dear Mr. Hartman, I am writing to accept your offer for the Senior Architect position at Hartman and Associates Amsterdam Office. I apologize for my previous hesitations and appreciate your patience in keeping the position open. My phone buzzed. Emily. Again. The 17th call since I'd left 3 days ago. I'd answered the first few, conversations that went in circles, her promising change while simultaneously defending why change wasn't really necessary, me trying to explain why I couldn't keep living like this, her accusing me of giving up too easily. "You haven't even given couples therapy a real chance," she'd said during call number 4. We'd been in couples therapy for 7 months. 7 months of me explaining how Lucas made me feel invisible in my own marriage. 7 months of the therapist gently suggesting that perhaps Emily's friendship had unclear boundaries. 7 months of Emily insisting that everyone was ganging up on her for having a friend. The therapist had actually pulled me aside after our last session, something she wasn't supposed to do. "Daniel," she'd said, her voice careful but firm, "I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that boundaries only work when both people want the relationship to work. What I'm seeing's one person trying to make space for 2 people and another person refusing to choose." I'd known then. Really known. But knowing and doing are different countries, and the bridge between them is built from courage you have to gather piece by piece. I am prepared to begin on February 1st, as discussed. I understand the relocation package includes temporary housing for the first month, and I would like to take advantage of that benefit while I search for permanent accommodation. Emily's texts were coming through now, a steady stream. We need to talk about this like adults. You can't just run away to Europe because we had one fight. Lucas said you're being manipulative. That last one made me laugh. A short, bitter sound that surprised me with its edge. Of course she'd talked to Lucas about this. Of course his opinion on our marriage was something she'd sought out and valued. Of course he was the one she'd turned to when her husband had finally had enough of being third in line for her attention. I wondered if she saw the irony. Probably not. Please confirm the following details at your earliest convenience. Start date: February 1st, 2024. Relocation package acceptance. Work visa sponsorship. Temporary housing, first month. I look forward to contributing to the Hartman and Associates team and to the exciting projects we discussed during my interviews. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it. This was the moment where I chose myself, maybe for the first time in years. The moment where I stopped setting myself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when that someone kept leaving the windows open. I thought about our wedding day, the way Emily had looked at me during our vows, like I was her whole world. "You're my person," she'd whispered after we'd kissed. Her forehead pressed to mine. My always person. When had I stopped being her person? When had Lucas reclaimed that title, or had he ever really given it up? I hit send. The whoosh sound felt like jumping off a cliff, that moment of free fall before you know if you'll fly or crash. My heart hammered against my ribs, and for a second, I thought I might throw up. Then my phone rang. Not Emily this time. The Amsterdam number I'd saved months ago when this had first been a possibility, a dream, something I'd wanted so badly I could taste it before I'd swallowed it down and told myself that love meant sacrifice. "Daniel? It's Henrik Hartman. I just saw your email come through." His voice was warm, tinged with a Dutch accent that made every word sound somehow more sophisticated. I'd liked him immediately during the interviews. His passion for sustainable architecture, his vision for the firm's expansion, the way he'd looked at my portfolio like he was seeing something valuable. "I wanted to call personally," he continued, "to tell you how thrilled we are to have you joining the team. I know this wasn't an easy decision for you." If he only knew. "Thank you, Mr. Hartman. I'm looking forward to it." "Henrik, please. We're not so formal here. And Daniel, I think you'll find Amsterdam agrees with you. It's a city for new beginnings." After we hung up, I sat there in the gathering darkness, watching the Boston skyline through Marcus's window. The city lights were coming on, one by one, like stars falling upward. Somewhere out there, maybe 12 blocks away, Emily was in our apartment. The lease was in her name, another thing I'd agreed to because she'd wanted it. Probably calling Lucas. Probably crying. Probably painting me as the villain in a story where I was simply the person who'd finally had enough. Marcus knocked softly before opening the door, 2 beers in hand. He didn't ask if I wanted one, just handed it over and sat down on the edge of the bed. "You sent it," he said. Not a question. I sent it. "How do you feel?" I took a long drink, considering. How did I feel? Terrified. Relieved. Guilty. Free. Like I was betraying everything I'd promised on our wedding day. Like I was finally keeping the promise I'd made to myself long before I'd met Emily, to never become so small that I disappeared. Like I just made either the best or worst decision of my life, I said finally. Marcus nodded slowly. You know what I think? I think the worst decision would have been staying and resenting her for the rest of your life, watching yourself shrink and shrink until you couldn't remember what it felt like to want something for yourself. She thinks I'm giving up too easily. Dude. Marcus turned to face me fully, his expression serious in a way I rarely saw from him. I've known you for 15 years. You don't give up easily. You don't give up at all. You turned down your dream job 3 times. 3. You moved across the country for her. You put your career on hold when she needed support. You went to therapy. You set boundaries. You communicated. You did everything the books and the counselors tell you to do. He paused, taking a drink. And she still chose him. Every single time a choice needed to be made between respecting your marriage and maintaining her thing with Lucas, she chose him. That's not you giving up. That's you finally recognizing when someone's already given up on you. The words hit like truth often does, uncomfortable and undeniable. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Emily. I'm coming over to Marcus's. We need to talk face to face. She's coming here, I said. Marcus grimaced. You want me to tell her you're not here? I thought about it. The old Daniel, the one who existed a week ago, would have said yes, would have avoided the confrontation, given her more time to craft her arguments, let her control the narrative the way she'd been controlling it for months. But that Daniel had sent the email. That Daniel had chosen Amsterdam, that Daniel was done avoiding. No, I said. Let her come. She arrived 40 minutes later, and I could hear the conversation from the bedroom, Marcus at the door, Emily's voice pitched high with stress. I just need to talk to him, Marcus. Please. He's an adult, Em. If he wanted to talk to you, he'd answer his phone. This is ridiculous. This is our marriage. You can't just keep him from me. I'm not keeping him from anyone. I'm respecting his space. Maybe you should try it. A pause, then, did he tell you? About Amsterdam? He did. And you think that's healthy? Running away to another country instead of working on his marriage? I walked out then, before Marcus could respond. Emily stood in the hallway, and I barely recognized her. Her hair was unwashed, pulled back in a messy bun. She wore the NYU sweatshirt she only pulled out when she was truly upset. My sweatshirt, actually, from my graduate school days, that she'd claimed as hers somewhere along the way. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. She looked devastated. And I felt nothing. Or not nothing, exactly. I felt sad. Sad for what we'd been. Sad for what we'd never be again. Sad that it had come to this. But I didn't feel the desperate urge to fix it, to make her feel better, to absorb her pain and carry it as my own. Daniel, she said my name like a prayer. Please, can we just talk, really talk? Okay, I said. Let's talk. We went to a coffee shop 2 blocks away, the kind of neutral territory that felt safer than either of our spaces. She ordered a chai latte, extra hot, oat milk, no foam, the order I could recite in my sleep, and I got black coffee, which she'd always said was too bitter, but I'd always loved. I'm sorry, she said as soon as we sat down. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I didn't realize how much this was hurting you. I didn't understand. I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup, feeling the heat seep into my palms. You didn't understand because you didn't want to understand. I've been telling you for 8 months. I've been clear, Em. So clear that our therapist had to pull me aside to tell me it was okay to have boundaries. She flinched. Dr. Morrison said that? She did. And you know what? She was right. I've been so focused on being understanding, on not being the controlling husband, on proving I'm not insecure, that I forgot I'm allowed to have needs. I'm allowed to expect my wife to prioritize our marriage. I do prioritize our marriage. You don't. The words came out flat, factual. You prioritize Lucas. You always have. And maybe that's not even about him specifically. Maybe it's about you needing that validation, that backup plan, that proof that you're still wanted by someone who isn't obligated to want you. Her face crumpled. That's not fair. Isn't it? Think about it, Emily. Really think about it. When was the last time you canceled plans with Lucas for me? When was the last time you told him you couldn't talk because you were spending time with your husband? When was the last time you chose me? She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. You know it's not that simple. It really is, though. It's exactly that simple. Relationships are about choices. Every day you choose where to put your energy, your attention, your emotional intimacy. And every day, you've been choosing him. He's my friend. I'm allowed to have friends. You're allowed to have friends. You're not allowed to have a relationship with your ex that's more intimate than your relationship with your husband, and then call me insecure when I object to it. She was crying now, tears running down her face in steady streams. A year ago, 6 months ago even, those tears would have broken me. I would have reached across the table, taken her hand, told her we'd figure it out. But I'd learned something these past few days, sitting in Marcus's spare room, writing and rewriting that email. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you can love someone and still need to leave them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away before you both forget who you used to be. Come to Amsterdam with me, I said suddenly, the words surprising us both. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. What? Come with me. Fresh start, new city, no Lucas to complicate things. Just us, building something new together. I watched her face carefully, watched the emotions play across it like weather. Hope, excitement. And then there it was, hesitation, fear, resistance. I can't just leave my job, Daniel. I just got promoted, and my family is here, and my friends, and Lucas. That's not, it is, say it, Em. You don't want to leave because you don't want to leave Lucas. She didn't deny it. Couldn't. The silence stretched between us, filling with all the things we'd never say, all the ways we'd failed each other, all the love that had curdled into resentment and obligation. I thought so, I said quietly. That's why I didn't ask you to come in the first place, because I already knew the answer. I stood up, leaving my coffee half finished. She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks, and I felt the strangest sense of closure, not the kind where everything is resolved and everyone's happy, but the kind where you finally accept what is instead of mourning what could have been. I'll be out of the apartment by the end of next week. The lease is yours. I don't want anything except my clothes and my books and my drafting table. You can have everything else. Daniel, please. I love you, I said, and I meant it. I probably always will in some way, but I love myself more. And I'm choosing me this time. I left her there, crying into her chai latte, and I didn't look back. Because looking back is how you turn into a pillar of salt, frozen by what you're leaving behind instead of freed by what you're moving toward. And I was done being frozen. Ending a marriage, I discovered, involves an astonishing amount of paperwork. Joint bank accounts to separate, insurance policies to update, her name to remove from my emergency contacts, my name to remove from hers. The small administrative dismantling of a shared life, each form a tiny death, each signature a nail in a coffin. I was building one document at a time. I sat at Marcus's kitchen table with my laptop and a folder thick with printed forms, working my way through the checklist I'd made. Marcus had left for work an hour ago, pressing a spare key into my hand. "Stay as long as you need," he'd said. "Seriously, I'm gone half the month anyway for work." The apartment was quiet except for the radiator's occasional hiss and the muffled sounds of the city beyond the windows. It was the kind of quiet I'd been craving for months. Not the tense silence of our apartment, where every word felt like stepping on a landmine, but the peaceful quiet of being alone without being lonely. My phone sat face down on the table. I'd stopped checking it compulsively, stopped jumping every time it buzzed. Emily had called 6 times yesterday, texted 14 times. I'd read them all, couldn't seem to help myself, watching the progression from anger to bargaining to grief. This is insane. You're throwing away 3 years of marriage over nothing. I told Lucas we need to take a break from our friendship. Isn't that what you wanted? I can't believe you're actually doing this. This isn't the man I married. That last one had made me laugh, a sound so bitter it surprised me. She was right. I wasn't the man she'd married. That man would have accepted her crumbs and called it a feast. That man would have believed her when she said Lucas was just a friend, even as she prioritized him over everything else. That man would have set himself on fire to keep her warm. But that man had sent the email to Amsterdam, and that man was learning, slowly, to like himself again. I opened my email, scanning through the latest messages from HR at Hartman & Associates. They'd sent over the relocation package details, a generous stipend for moving expenses, temporary housing in a furnished apartment near the office, assistance with work permits and visa applications, even contact information for an expat integration program. Reading through it felt surreal, like I was reading about someone else's life. Daniel Torres, Senior Architect, Amsterdam office. The person in those documents sounded successful, confident, like someone who made bold choices and leapt toward his dreams instead of away from his nightmares. I wanted to be that person. I was going to be that person. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I froze. Emily knew where Marcus lived, but when I checked the peephole, it was a woman I didn't recognize holding a large manila envelope. "Delivery for Daniel Torres," she said when I opened the door. "I need a signature." I signed, took the envelope, and my stomach dropped when I saw the return address. Hartman & Associates, Amsterdam. This was it. The official offer letter, the contract, all the documents that would make this real in a way that couldn't be undone. I spread them across the kitchen table, reading through each page carefully. The salary was extraordinary, nearly triple what I made in Boston, even accounting for the higher cost of living. The benefits package included things I'd never even considered: comprehensive international health coverage, annual travel allowance, even a bicycle budget because apparently that's how you get around Amsterdam. There was a sticky note on the contract, Henrik's handwriting. "Welcome to the team, Daniel. We're excited to have you. H." Something in my chest loosened, a knot I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. This was real. This was happening. In 6 weeks, I'd be living in Amsterdam, working my dream job, building a life that was mine alone. I signed everything with a strange sense of ceremony, dating each document carefully. January 14th, 2024. The day I officially chose myself. My phone buzzed. Not Emily this time, but my sister, Carla. Mom told me about Amsterdam. Please tell me you're actually doing this and not backing out again. I'm doing it, I typed back. Signed the contract this morning. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, thank fucking God. I love Emily, but watching you shrink yourself for her was killing me. You never said anything. Would you have listened? She had a point. I probably would have defended Emily, defended our marriage, defended my choice to stay. I would have called it love and sacrifice and commitment, all those noble words that sounded so much better than doormat and afraid and settling. Probably not, I admitted. Exactly. Sometimes people have to figure their own shit out. But I'm proud of you, baby brother. This is brave. Brave. The word settled over me like a coat I wasn't sure fit yet. It didn't feel brave. It felt terrifying and necessary, and like I was one bad day away from changing my mind and crawling back to the familiar misery of a marriage that was killing me slowly. But maybe that's what brave was, doing the terrifying, necessary thing anyway. I spent the rest of the day handling logistics. Called my landlord to explain I'd be breaking my portion of the lease. Emily could keep the apartment, had already said she would. Scheduled a call with an international moving company to get quotes for shipping my belongings. Started making a list of what I actually wanted to take versus what I could leave behind. It was striking how little I needed. The drafting table, my books, my clothes, my laptop. The rest of it. The furniture we'd picked out together. The kitchen stuff from our wedding registry. The art on the walls. None of it felt like mine anymore. It was all part of a life I'd been living in her orbit, and I wanted to travel light into this new chapter. Around 4 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, but a Boston area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Daniel Torres? Speaking. Mr. Torres, this is Patricia Chen from Morrison Counseling Associates. Dr. Morrison asked me to reach out. My therapist. Calling me outside of session. That couldn't be good. Is everything okay? Dr. Morrison wanted me to inform you that Emily has requested emergency sessions and has asked if you'd be willing to participate. She's not supposed to reach out directly per professional boundaries, but she wanted you to know the option is available if you're interested. Emergency sessions. As if this was a crisis that could be fixed with the right conversation, the right words, the right amount of professional mediation. Please tell Dr. Morrison I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested. I think Emily and I are past the point where therapy can help. A pause. Then carefully. Dr. Morrison suspected that might be your answer. She also asked me to tell you, and I'm quoting here, "You're making a healthy choice for yourself. Trust that." After I hung up, I sat there holding the phone, feeling the weight of those words. A healthy choice. Trust that. Emily had been texting again while I was on the call. Lucas and I aren't even talking anymore. I blocked his number. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Daniel. Couples retreat. More therapy. Moving to Amsterdam with you. Anything. Why won't you fight for us? That last question settled in my chest like a stone. Why wouldn't I fight for us? because I'd been fighting alone for months, maybe longer. Fighting to be seen, to be heard, to matter as much as an ex-boyfriend who got more of my wife's emotional energy than I did. Fighting to believe her when she said she loved me while watching her actions prove otherwise. Fighting against the growing certainty that I was in this marriage alone, that I'd been alone for a long time. You can't fight for an us when there's only ever been a me and a her, two separate people playing at being together. I typed out a response, deleted it, tried again, deleted that too. Finally settled on, I did fight, for months. You just didn't notice because you were too busy fighting for him. I hit send before I could second guess it, then immediately put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I couldn't do this anymore. The constant back and forth, the emotional whiplash, the way she could make me doubt my own reality with a well-placed text. Instead, I opened my laptop and started researching Amsterdam neighborhoods. Jordan, where the office was helping me find temporary housing. De Pijp, young and artsy. Oud West, a bit more residential. I clicked through photos of narrow houses with huge windows, canals lined with bicycles, cafes with outdoor seating even in winter. A life that could be mine. A city that didn't know me as Emily's husband, or the guy who gave up his dream job 3 times. A place where I could be just Daniel, figuring out who that was, without someone else's needs drowning out my own. My laptop dinged with a new email. Marcus, with the subject line, mandatory viewing. Inside was a link to a YouTube video. How to ride a bike in Amsterdam without dying. The thumbnail showed a terrified-looking tourist wobbling on a bicycle while locals zoomed past. You're going to eat shit so hard, Marcus had written. I give you 2 days before you end up in a canal. I laughed, actually laughed, and it felt good. Foreign, almost. When was the last time I'd laughed like that? Not the polite chuckle I'd perfected for Emily's work events, or the forced ha-ha when she made jokes at my expense. Real laughter, the kind that came from somewhere genuine. I was going to Amsterdam. I was going to ride bikes and eat stroopwafels and learn Dutch, and design buildings that would outlast this heartbreak. I was going to wake up in the morning and make decisions based on what I wanted, not what someone else needed from me. I was going to be free. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, like standing at the edge of a cliff and finally understanding that jumping wasn't falling, it was flying. The apartment looked different when I returned to pack my things. Not physically different. Emily hadn't moved anything, hadn't redecorated in the week I'd been gone. But it felt different. The way a word you've said too many times loses meaning. This space that had been home for 2 years was now just rooms containing things I used to care about. Emily wasn't there when I arrived. She'd texted that morning. I'll stay at my mom's while you pack. I can't watch you leave. Part of me felt relieved. Part of me felt cheated out of some final confrontation, some moment of clarity where everything would suddenly make sense. But that wasn't how endings worked in real life. Real endings were messy and incomplete, full of things left unsaid and questions without answers. I'd brought Marcus and his girlfriend, Teresa, to help. Safety in numbers, and also because I needed witnesses, people who could confirm I'd only taken what was mine, that I hadn't destroyed anything, or stolen, or done any of the petty, vengeful things a smaller part of me wanted to do. Jesus, Teresa said, looking around the living room. This place is depressing. She wasn't wrong. The curtains were drawn, dishes piled in the sink, Emily's work papers scattered across the coffee table in chaotic drifts. The air smelled stale, like grief and unwashed laundry. "She's not handling this well," I said, stating the obvious. "Good," Teresa replied, and when I looked at her surprised, she shrugged. "Sorry, but she had this coming. You don't get to treat someone like a backup plan and then fall apart when they finally leave." Marcus shot her a look. "Be nice." But I appreciated the bluntness. Everyone else had been so careful around me, tiptoeing around my feelings like I was made of glass. Teresa treated me like I was solid, like I could handle the truth. "Bedroom first," I said. "Get my clothes, then we'll tackle the office." My clothes took up exactly half the closet. She'd never encroached on my space, I'd give her that. Shirts on the left, pants folded on shelves, shoes lined up beneath. I pulled them down mechanically, folding them into the boxes Teresa had brought, trying not to think about all the times Emily had stood here watching me get dressed for work, kissing my shoulder, telling me I looked handsome. Had she meant it? Or had she been thinking about Lucas even then, comparing me to him, finding me wanting? Stop, that way lay madness. You couldn't interrogate every good memory for signs of betrayal, couldn't cross-examine the past with what you knew now. It would drive you crazy. "What about these?" Marcus held up a stack of photos from the nightstand. Our wedding, vacation in Maine, Christmas with both our families. Our faces smiled out from the frames, frozen in moments that felt like they'd happened to different people. "Leave them," I said. "She might want them." "You don't?" I looked at the photos again. Really looked. That couple seemed happy. Maybe they had been in those specific moments. But moments weren't the same as a marriage, and happiness wasn't the same as health. "No," I said finally. "I don't need photos to remember the good parts, and I don't want to be reminded of them when I'm trying to move forward." The office was harder. My drafting table dominated the space, the one piece of furniture I'd insisted on when we moved in. It was massive, old school, bought from an estate sale and lovingly restored. I'd spent countless hours at it, designing, dreaming, planning a future that now felt like someone else's fantasy. "We're going to need help moving this," Marcus said, running his hand over the smooth surface. "This thing weighs a ton." "Worth it, though. I can't leave it." While Marcus went to grab his truck, Teresa and I packed up my books. She worked quietly beside me, pulling volumes from shelves and wrapping them in newspaper. Then she paused, holding up a worn copy of The Fountainhead. "Emily gave you this, didn't she? There's an inscription." I knew without looking what it said. "To Daniel, who builds beautiful things and an even more beautiful life. All my love, E." Our first anniversary. She'd been so proud of herself for finding a first edition, had watched me open it with this nervous excitement. I'd loved it, loved her, loved the thoughtfulness of a gift that showed she really saw me. Or had that been real either? Had any of it been real? "Throw it away," I heard myself say. "Daniel, I mean it. Throw it away. I don't want it." Teresa looked at me for a long moment, then nodded and set the book aside in a separate pile. She didn't argue, didn't try to convince me I'd regret it later. She just understood that sometimes you had to burn the bridges to stop yourself from crossing back. We worked in silence after that, the pile of boxes growing, the apartment emptying of my presence. It struck me how little physical space I'd actually occupied here. My drafting table, my books, my clothes. Everything else was hers or ours, that was really hers. I'd moved in light, and I was leaving even lighter. My phone buzzed. Emily's mom, Barbara. I stared at the name on the screen, debating whether to answer. Barbara had always been kind to me, had welcomed me into their family without reservation. This was going to hurt. Hello? Daniel. Her voice was thick, like she'd been crying. I wanted to call before you left. Emily told me about Amsterdam. I'm sorry, Barbara. I know this isn't what you wanted. What I wanted? She gave a wet laugh. Honey, what I wanted was for my daughter to treat you the way you deserved to be treated. What I wanted was for her to learn from my mistakes instead of repeating them. That surprised me. Your mistakes? A long pause. Then, Emily's father and I divorced when she was 12. She doesn't talk about it much, pretends it didn't affect her. But there was someone else, not physically, but emotionally. I let an old friend become more important than my marriage, and I told myself it was innocent, that my husband was being controlling and insecure. She took a shaky breath. I see her doing the exact same thing with Lucas, and I tried to talk to her about it, but she won't listen. She's so convinced she's right, that you're the one with the problem. My throat felt tight. I appreciate you telling me that. I just want you to know, you're not crazy. You're not insecure or controlling or any of the things she's probably called you. You had reasonable boundaries, and she refused to respect them. That's on her, not you. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of what used to be our bed, trying not to cry. Validation shouldn't have mattered this much, but it did. For months, I'd been questioning my own sanity, wondering if I was being unreasonable, if I was the problem. But I wasn't. I just loved someone who loved someone else more. Marcus returned with his truck and 2 guys from his gym. Together, we maneuvered the drafting table down 3 flights of stairs, cursing and laughing, and nearly dropping it twice. By the time we got it secured in the truck bed, we were all sweating despite the January cold. Last chance to change your mind, Marcus said, only half joking. I looked up at the apartment windows. Our bedroom, dark and empty now. The living room where we'd had 1,000 dinners, 100 fights, countless moments of mundane domesticity that had felt like building a life. But you couldn't build on a foundation that was always shifting, always making space for a third person who shouldn't have been there at all. I'm good, I said. Let's go. We drove to a storage facility near Marcus's place. I'd rented a unit for anything I couldn't take to Amsterdam immediately. As we unloaded, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Emily, realizing I was at the apartment, freaking out. You're really doing this. You're really just leaving. I can't believe you won't even talk to me. This is so cruel, Daniel. Lucas was right about you. That last one made me laugh out loud, a sharp bark of sound that made Marcus look over concerned. You good? Lucas was right about me, I read aloud. Can you believe that? She's literally proving my point and doesn't even realize it. Teresa, who'd been organizing boxes, straightened up. Block her. Seriously, just block her number. You don't need this shit. I can't just block my wife. Soon-to-be ex-wife, she corrected. And yes, you can. You're not obligated to be emotionally available to someone who's using that access to hurt you. She was right. I knew she was right. But blocking Emily felt so final, so harsh. It felt like admitting defeat, like proving I was the cold, unfeeling person she was probably telling everyone I was. But maybe I needed to be cold right now. Maybe I needed to protect myself more than I needed to be nice. I blocked her number. Then, after a moment's hesitation, I blocked Lucas too. Not that he'd been texting me, but on principle. I was done with both of them, done with the drama, done with caring about what they thought or felt or said about me. My phone immediately felt lighter in my hand. We finished unloading and went to a bar near Marcus's apartment, the three of us claiming a corner booth and ordering too much food. Teresa told stories about her most difficult clients. She was a divorce attorney, which now felt hilariously appropriate. And Marcus complained about his boss, and nobody mentioned Emily or Amsterdam, or the fact that my entire life had just fit into a 10 by 10 storage unit. It felt good, normal, like I was just a guy having drinks with friends, not a man whose marriage had imploded, not someone about to flee the country to outrun his heartbreak. "Can I ask you something?" Teresa said during a lull in conversation. "And you can tell me to fuck off if it's too personal." "Shoot. Do you still love her?" I considered the question, rolling it around in my mind like a stone. Did I still love Emily? The Emily who'd made me laugh on our first date, who'd cried happy tears when I proposed, who'd held my hand through my father's funeral, or the Emily who'd chosen Lucas over me again and again, who'd called my pain insecurity, who'd made me feel crazy for having basic needs. "I love who she was," I said finally, "or who I thought she was. But that person either never existed or she stopped being that person a long time ago. The woman she is now, the one who thinks blocking her ex is a sacrifice worth praise? I don't think I love her. I think I love the idea of her, the potential of what we could have been." Teresa nodded slowly. "That's the hardest part, isn't it? Letting go of the potential, the future you thought you were building." "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, it really is. We drank to that, to futures that never happened, to potential that went unrealized, to the courage it took to walk away from what could have been toward what actually was. And somewhere in the middle of that toast, surrounded by friends who actually gave a damn about my happiness, I felt something shift. Not healing. It was too soon for that. But maybe the very beginning of it. The first tentative recognition that I was going to be okay. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually. Amsterdam was waiting. A whole new life was waiting. And for the first time in months, I was actually looking forward to living it. The last week in Boston felt like living in a photograph that was slowly fading. Everything became a last. Last coffee from my favorite cafe. Last run along the Charles River. Last Sunday brunch at the place with the perfect eggs Benedict. I moved through the city like a ghost, saying goodbye to a life that was already behind me, even though I was still physically present. Marcus's apartment had become my staging ground. Boxes everywhere, my passport and work documents in a folder I checked obsessively, countdown apps on my phone marking the days until my flight. January 28th, 7 days away, then 6, then 5. My lawyer had sent over the separation agreement. Emily hadn't contested anything, probably because I wasn't asking for anything except my freedom. No alimony, no splitting of assets, just a clean break. She'd have to file the actual divorce paperwork after we'd been separated for the required time, but this was the first step. I signed it in Marcus's kitchen, my hand steady. Another ending, another signature, another piece of paper that said what we'd promised forever, to had an expiration date, after all. "You doing okay?" Marcus asked, watching me from the doorway. "Honestly? Yeah, I am." And I meant it. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, the panic had subsided. The grief was still there. I'd catch it sometimes in quiet moments, a wave of sadness for what I'd lost. But it didn't drown me anymore. It was just there, present, but not overwhelming. A scar forming where the wound had been. My phone had been blissfully quiet since I'd blocked Emily. A few texts from mutual friends, carefully neutral, asking if I was okay. I responded to most of them with brief updates, moving to Amsterdam, new job, excited for the change. I didn't elaborate, didn't explain, didn't justify. The people who really cared would understand. The rest didn't matter. On Tuesday, my mom called. "Mijo," she said, her voice warm and worried in equal measure. "Carla told me you signed the papers." "I did." "And you're really going to Amsterdam? You're sure?" I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Mama, I've never been more sure of anything." A pause, then, "Good. That girl, I tried to like her, Daniel. I really did. But she never saw you. Not really. She saw a nice man who would make her life easier, who would bend himself into whatever shape she needed. But she never saw you." My throat tightened. "You never said anything." "What could I say? You loved her. You were happy, or I thought you were. And then you weren't. And I watched you get smaller and smaller. And I wanted to shake you and tell you to leave." She laughed softly. "But you can't tell your children those things. They have to figure it out themselves." "I wish I'd figured it out sooner." "You figured it out at exactly the right time. Not a moment before you were ready." We talked for an hour after that, about Amsterdam and the job and her upcoming trip to visit my sister in California. Normal things, future things. It felt good, talking about a future that didn't include navigating around Emily's needs, Emily's moods, Emily's ex-boyfriend. Wednesday brought an unexpected visitor to Marcus's apartment. I answered the door to find Emily's best friend, Jasmine, standing in the hallway looking uncomfortable. "Hey," she said, "can we talk?" I let her in, wary. Jasmine had always been kind to me, but she was Emily's person first. This could be an ambush, an attempt to talk me out of leaving, to paint me as the villain in whatever narrative Emily was spinning. "Emily doesn't know I'm here," Jasmine said, as if reading my mind. And honestly, she'd probably kill me if she knew. But I had to say something before you left. "Okay." She sat on Marcus's couch, and I remained standing, arms crossed. Defensive posture, Teresa would probably say. But I felt defensive. I felt like I needed armor for whatever was coming. "I love Emily," Jasmine started. "She's been my best friend since college. But Daniel, what she did to you, with Lucas, that was fucked up." I blinked, surprised. "I told her," Jasmine continued, her voice gaining strength. "I told her so many times. You're married now, you need boundaries with your ex. You're hurting Daniel. This isn't fair." And she'd always have some excuse. Lucas was going through something. I was being dramatic. You were being insecure. She looked at me directly. But you weren't being insecure. You were being normal. Any person would be uncomfortable with their spouse having that kind of relationship with an ex. And the fact that she made you feel crazy for it? That was manipulative. whether she meant it that way or not. Why are you telling me this? Because she's telling everyone you abandoned her, that you gave up on the marriage over nothing, that you're running away instead of fighting for your relationship. And I can't let you leave thinking that's what happened. You didn't abandon her, Daniel. She abandoned you months ago, but you just finally stopped accepting it. Something in my chest that I hadn't realized was tense finally relaxed. Thank you, I said quietly. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner. I'm sorry I let her make you feel like you were the problem. After she left, I sat in the quiet apartment and let myself cry. Not the desperate, panicked tears of the early days, but something gentler. Relief, maybe. Or grief for a marriage I'd mourned alone for so long that actually ending it almost felt anticlimactic. Thursday was my last day at my Boston firm. They threw me a small goodbye party, cake in the conference room, generic well wishes, the kinds of conversations that feel performative but necessary. My boss, Richard, pulled me aside afterward. "This is a good move for you," he said. "I always knew you were too talented for this place. We do good work here. But Hartman and Associates? That's the big leagues. You're going to do amazing things. Thank you for taking a chance on me 3 years ago. Thank you for making me look good by hiring you." He paused. "And Daniel? I don't know what's going on with your personal life. I heard some rumors, but that's not my business. But I do know this. Sometimes the biggest risk is not taking the leap. You're leaping. That takes guts." I cleaned out my desk, packed up my few belongings, said goodbye to colleagues I'd probably never see again. It should have felt sad, but it just felt like shedding skin I'd outgrown. That night, Marcus took me out for what he called a proper Irish goodbye. "Except we're actually saying goodbye," he said. "So I guess it's an improper Irish goodbye." We went to the bar where we'd watched countless Patriots games, where I'd celebrated my engagement to Emily, where I'd drowned my sorrows more times than I could count in recent months. The bartender knew us by name, had our drinks ready before we even ordered. "To Amsterdam," Marcus said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings and old friends and the courage to choose yourself." We drank, and then Marcus got serious in that way he only did when it really mattered. "I'm proud of you, man. I know I joke around a lot, but I need you to know that. What you're doing, leaving, starting over, choosing your own happiness over staying in something that was killing you, that's brave. That's really fucking brave. It doesn't feel brave. It feels terrifying. That's how you know it's brave. If it was easy, everyone would do it." We talked until last call, about everything and nothing. He told me about proposing to Teresa. News to me. Apparently it was happening next month. I told him about the apartment I'd found in Amsterdam, the projects I'd be working on, the nervous excitement that had started replacing the grief. "You'll come visit?" I asked as we stumbled out into the cold January night. "Are you kidding? Free place to stay in Amsterdam? I'm going to be that annoying friend who shows up every other month." Friday, I finalized everything with the movers. Most of my stuff would go into storage here. I'd figure out what I actually wanted to ship to Amsterdam once I was settled. For now, I was traveling light. 2 suitcases, a carry-on, my laptop bag. Everything I needed to start over fit into 4 pieces of luggage. There was something liberating about that. Saturday, I spent the day alone, wandering through Boston one last time. The public garden, still beautiful even in winter. The North End, where I bought one last cannoli from Mike's Pastry. Cambridge, walking through Harvard Yard like I used to do when I needed to think. I walked past the restaurant where Emily and I had our first date, past the apartment we'd lived in before this one, past all the landmarks of a relationship that had felt like forever, but turned out to be just a chapter. And I felt okay. Not happy, not sad, just okay. Neutral. Ready. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The moving company confirming my shipment would arrive at the Amsterdam storage facility in 4 to 6 weeks. Another email from HR, welcoming me and reminding me about orientation on my first day. A text from my mom with a prayer in Spanish and 3 heart emojis. The world was moving forward, and I was moving with it. That night, I did something I'd been avoiding for 2 weeks. I unblocked Emily just for a moment to see if she'd tried to contact me. The messages flooded in, dozens of them, a progression from angry to desperate to resigned. The most recent was from that morning. I hope you find whatever you're looking for in Amsterdam. I hope it makes you happy. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed. It wasn't quite an apology. It still put the blame on me for needing too much rather than on her for giving too little. But it was as close as she'd probably ever get to acknowledging her part in this. I thought about responding. Thought about saying, what? That I forgave her? That I hoped she'd learn from this? That I wished her well? In the end, I didn't respond at all. I just blocked her again and deleted the messages. Some things didn't need closure. Some things you just had to let go of, even when they're still talking. Sunday, my last full day, I spent packing and repacking my suitcases, obsessively checking my documents, going through my mental checklist for the 100th time. Passport, visa, work contract, proof of residence, bank cards, medications, adapters for European outlets. Teresa came over with Thai food and wine, and the 3 of us, her, Marcus, and me, sat on the floor of Marcus's living room, eating pad Thai straight from the containers. Speech, Teresa demanded. You're leaving tomorrow. This calls for a speech. I'm not good at speeches. Tough. Speech anyway. I thought about it, trying to find words for everything I was feeling. Fear and excitement and grief and hope all tangled up together. Okay, I said finally. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be moving to Amsterdam alone, leaving my marriage, starting completely over, I would have said they were crazy. I would have said I'd never do that I wasn't that kind of person, that I believed in commitment and working through hard times. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But I think I was confusing commitment with self-abandonment. I thought loving someone meant making myself smaller so they'd have more room. I thought sacrifice meant giving up the things that made me me, and I was wrong. The last few weeks have taught me that you can love someone and still leave them. You can want something to work and still accept when it doesn't. You can be sad about an ending while also being excited about a new beginning. I raised my plastic cup of wine. So here's to Amsterdam. Here's to choosing yourself. Here's to learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. We clinked our containers together, plastic and cardboard and completely imperfect, and it felt more meaningful than any wedding toast ever had. That night, lying in Marcus's spare bed for the last time, I let myself think about Emily one final time. Really think about her. Not the idea of her or the potential of her, but the real, actual woman I'd married. I hoped she'd be okay. I hoped she'd learn from this, grow from this, maybe even understand someday why I'd had to leave. I hoped she'd find whatever she was looking for in Lucas, or realize that what she was looking for wasn't in another person at all. But mostly, I hoped I'd be able to think of her someday without this ache in my chest, without the anger and hurt and betrayal. Just as someone I used to know, someone I used to love, someone who was part of my story but not the whole story. Tomorrow, I'd board a plane to Amsterdam. Tomorrow, I'd start the next chapter. Tomorrow, I'd be Daniel Torres, senior architect, expat, man who chose himself. But tonight, for one last night, I let myself be Daniel Torres, the guy whose marriage didn't work out, the guy who was running towards something as much as he was running away, the guy who was terrified and hopeful in equal measure. Tomorrow would come soon enough. For now, I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, dreaming of canals and bicycles and a future I couldn't quite see yet, but was finally brave enough to reach for. The airport felt like a liminal space between lives. I stood in the security line at Logan International, carry-on at my feet, passport in hand, watching families say goodbye and business people scroll through phones and children complain about early departures. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the air recycled and sterile, the constant drone of announcements washing over everything like white noise. Marcus and Teresa had dropped me off at departures. Marcus hugging me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. "Don't be a stranger," he'd said. "And for the love of God, actually answer your phone when you're over there." "I will." "And Daniel?" He'd pulled back, hands on my shoulders. "You're doing the right thing. Don't forget that when it gets hard." Now, shuffling forward in line, I pulled out my phone one last time before I'd have to turn it off for the flight. A text from my mom. "Que Dios te bendiga, mijo. Call me when you land." One from Carla. "Proud of you, baby bro. Go be amazing." One from my boss at Hartman and Associates. "Safe travels, Daniel. We're excited to have you on the team." And one from an unknown number that made my stomach drop. "I know you blocked me. Emily gave me your number. You're a coward for leaving like this. She deserves better than you. Lucas." Of course Lucas would text me, would have one last word, would need to insert himself even into my departure. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling that familiar anger rise in my chest, the urge to respond, to defend myself, to explain that Emily had made her choice and it wasn't me, that he was part of the problem, not the solution, that... I deleted it, blocked the number, didn't respond. Because what was the point? Lucas would believe whatever Emily told him. He'd be the hero in their story, the good friend who supported her through her husband's abandonment. And I'd be the villain, the insecure man who couldn't handle his wife having friends. Let them have that narrative. I was building a different story now. Security was mercifully quick. January wasn't peak travel season, apparently. I gathered my belongings from the conveyor belt, slipped my shoes back on, and headed toward my gate. Gate C18. KLM Royal Dutch Airlines. Boarding in 90 minutes. I found a seat facing the window, watching planes taxi and take off, and felt the reality of it settle over me like a blanket. I was really doing this. In a few hours, I'd be in the air. In 8 hours, I'd land in Amsterdam. By this time tomorrow, I'd be in my temporary apartment, unpacking my life, starting over. The weight of it should have been crushing. Instead, it felt like possibility. I pulled out my laptop, opened the folder of documents I'd been obsessively organizing. my lease for the temporary apartment, a studio in Jordan, walking distance from the office, my work contract, my visa documentation, photos of the city I downloaded, neighborhoods I wanted to explore, restaurants I wanted to try, a whole life waiting to be lived. Is this seat taken? I looked up to find an elderly woman gesturing to the empty seat beside me. It's all yours. She settled in with a grateful sigh, arranging her bags with the practiced efficiency of a frequent traveler. Her accent, when she spoke again, was unmistakably Dutch. Amsterdam? She asked, nodding at my laptop screen, which displayed a map of the city. Yeah, moving there actually. Starting a new job. Her face lit up. Oh, how wonderful. Amsterdam is a beautiful city. I'm going home after visiting my daughter in Boston. You'll love it there. We chatted as we waited, her telling me about the best bakeries for oliebollen, the secret to navigating the tram system, the museums I absolutely had to visit. It was pleasant, undemanding conversation, the kind that filled time without requiring vulnerability. You seem nervous, she observed at one point. That obvious? Only because I know that look. I had it when I moved to America 40 years ago. That mix of terror and excitement. She patted my hand. It's a good look. It means you're about to do something that matters. Boarding was called, and I found my seat in economy. Middle row, window seat, the next 7 hours of my life compressed into a space barely big enough for my legs. But I didn't care. I could have been riding in the cargo hold, and it wouldn't have mattered. I was going to Amsterdam. As the plane taxied, I turned my phone off completely. No more texts from Lucas. No more emails. No more connection to the life I was leaving behind. Just this moment. This in-between space, neither here nor there. The flight attendant went through safety procedures I'd heard 100 times. The engines roared. And then, that moment of liftoff, the ground falling away, Boston shrinking beneath us. The harbor and the skyline and everything I'd known becoming miniature and then disappearing into clouds. I watched until there was nothing left to see, just the white gray of cloud cover, and then, breaking through it, the impossible blue of the sky above. Somewhere in that transition, I felt the last thread holding me to Emily finally snap. Not painfully, not dramatically, just a quiet release like setting down something heavy you'd been carrying too long. I was free. The woman from the terminal was seated 2 rows ahead. She turned and caught my eye, giving me a small smile and a thumbs up. I smiled back, feeling lighter than I had in months. The flight attendant came through with drinks. I ordered a whiskey, though it was barely 11 a.m. Fuck it. I was celebrating. To new beginnings, I murmured to myself, raising the small plastic cup. And then I opened my laptop, pulled up the orientation materials from Hartman and Associates, and started studying. The projects I'd be working on, the team I'd be joining, the sustainable architecture initiatives that had made me want this job in the first place. This was real. This was happening. This was my life now. Somewhere over the Atlantic. Somewhere in that dark space between continents. Between the life I'd left and the life I was flying toward. I fell asleep. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't dream about Emily or the apartment or what I'd lost. I dreamed about canals and bicycles and a studio apartment with huge windows letting in northern light, and a drafting table where I'd design buildings that would outlast all of this heartache, and a city where nobody knew me as Emily's husband or Lucas's rival or anything except Daniel Torres, architect, finally living the life he'd chosen for himself. When I woke, the pilot was announcing our descent into Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, and I was ready. The first thing that struck me about Amsterdam was the light. It was different from Boston, softer somehow, more diffuse, filtering through clouds in a way that made everything look like it was part of a painting. I stood outside Schiphol Airport, winter air sharp in my lungs, watching trams glide past and cyclists weave through traffic with casual confidence, and thought, this is real. I'm really here. The Uber driver who picked me up was chatty in that friendly Dutch way, speaking perfect English with just a hint of an accent, pointing out landmarks as we drove into the city. The modern architecture of the airport giving way to the classic beauty of Amsterdam proper. Narrow houses leaning against each other like old friends sharing secrets. Canals everywhere reflecting the gray-white sky. First time in Amsterdam? He asked. First time living here. Ah, welcome, welcome. You'll love it. Best city in the world, I think. Though I'm biased, yes? He laughed. Where are you staying? Jordan. Temporary place while I look for something permanent. Jordan is beautiful, very central. You can walk everywhere, or bike. You have a bike? Not yet. You need one. Everyone bikes here. Don't worry, you'll figure it out. Amsterdammers are very patient with newcomers. Mostly. He grinned in the rearview mirror. The apartment was on the third floor of a canal house, accessed by stairs so steep they were practically a ladder. The landlord, a woman named Saskia, met me at the door with a warm smile and an envelope of keys. Mr. Torres? Welcome, welcome. Please come in. Watch your head. These old houses, they were built for shorter people, I think. The studio was small but perfect. Hardwood floors, exposed beams, windows overlooking the canal. Furnished simply, a bed, a small couch, a table with 2 chairs, a tiny kitchen barely bigger than a closet. But the light. God, the light streaming through those windows made everything feel spacious and possible. The Wi-Fi password is here, Saskia said, handing me a card. And here's information about trash collection, the building rules, emergency contacts. If you need anything, I'm on the first floor, and there's a wonderful bakery 2 streets over, Bakkerij van der Linden. Best bread in Amsterdam. After she left, I stood in the center of the room, my suitcases by the door, and just breathed. No Emily, no Lucas, no reminders of a marriage that had failed or dreams I'd deferred. Just me, a studio apartment, and a whole city waiting to be explored. I unpacked methodically, hanging clothes in the narrow wardrobe, arranging toiletries in the bathroom that was so small I could barely turn around. Set up my laptop on the table, plugged in my phone to charge, watching messages load as it connected to the Wi-Fi. Nothing from Emily. She was still blocked. A few from my family, asking if I'd landed safely. One from Henrik Hartman. Welcome to Amsterdam. Take tomorrow to settle in. Orientation begins Tuesday at 9 a.m. Looking forward to working with you. I responded to each message, then set my phone down and looked at the time. 6 p.m. In Boston, it would be noon. Emily was probably at work, or maybe at lunch, or maybe with Lucas, crying about how her husband had abandoned her. I pushed the thought away. That was the old life. That was the old Daniel who spent his time worrying about what Emily was doing, who she was with, whether she was thinking about him. This Daniel was in Amsterdam. This Daniel was about to go find dinner in a city he'd never explored. This Daniel was going to be okay. I bundled up. January in Amsterdam was cold, hovering just above freezing, and ventured out into the neighborhood. The streets were beautiful even in winter, narrow and winding, lined with those iconic canal houses with their varied gables and huge windows. Bikes everywhere, chained to railings and bridges, some ancient and rusted, some new and gleaming. I walked without direction, just letting the city reveal itself to me. Cafes with steamed windows and the smell of coffee. Brown cafes, which I'd learned were traditional Dutch pubs, with dark interiors and groups of locals laughing over beer. Restaurants with menus in Dutch I couldn't quite parse yet, though many had English translations below. I ended up at a place called De Reiger, drawn in by the warm light and the sound of conversation. The hostess seated me at a small table by the window, handed me a menu, and left me to study it. Everything sounded good. Everything sounded unfamiliar. I ended up ordering stamp pot, mashed potatoes with vegetables, traditional Dutch comfort food, and a local beer whose name I definitely mispronounced. While I waited, I watched people passing on the street outside, couples holding hands, friends laughing, people on bikes loaded down with groceries, somehow balancing everything while navigating cobblestones and traffic. Everyone looked purposeful, like they belonged, like they knew exactly where they were going. I wondered how long it would take before I looked like that, before this city felt like home instead of a beautiful foreign place I was visiting. The food arrived, and it was exactly what I needed, warm and hearty and grounding. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, listening to the conversations around me in Dutch and English and languages I couldn't identify. This was my life now. This city, these streets, these sounds. After dinner, I walked some more, following the canals as the sky darkened and the city lights came on. Amsterdam at night was magical. The canal reflections doubling every light, the bridges illuminated, the windows of canal houses glowing warm against the cold. I found myself on a small bridge, leaning against the railing, watching water ripple past. And for the first time since I'd made the decision to leave, I let myself feel the full weight of it. I'd left my wife. I'd moved to a foreign country alone. I'd given up the life I'd built for a chance at something better, something that was mine. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was the most honest thing I'd ever done. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "You alive? How's Amsterdam?" Alive. Amsterdam is beautiful. I think I'm going to be okay. You're going to be better than okay. You're going to be fucking amazing. I smiled, pocketed my phone, and started walking back toward my apartment. The streets were quieter now, most people inside for the evening. I passed a small grocery store that was still open and ducked in, figuring I should stock up on basics. The Dutch labels were confusing, but I managed. Bread, cheese, coffee, milk, eggs, the essentials. The cashier was patient with my fumbling attempt to pay in euros, coins I wasn't used to yet. Denominations I had to check twice. "You are new here?" she asked kindly. "Is it that obvious?" "Little bit, but don't worry, you learn fast. Welcome to Amsterdam." Back at the apartment, I put away my groceries, made coffee even though it was late, and sat at the table looking out the window at the canal below. The water was dark and still, reflecting the streetlights in wavering lines. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in Amsterdam for the first time. Tuesday, I'd start my new job. Next week, I'd start looking for a permanent apartment. Next month, I'd maybe make some friends, learn some Dutch, figure out the tram system without constantly checking Google Maps. But tonight, I was just a guy in a studio apartment, drinking coffee, watching a canal in a city that was slowly becoming his. I thought about Emily one last time, not with anger or hurt, but with a kind of sad acceptance. We'd loved each other once. We'd promised forever, and we'd meant it. But forever is made of choices, and she'd made hers, and I'd made mine. And here we were. I hoped she was okay. I hoped she'd figure out what she wanted. I hoped she and Lucas would either make it work, or she'd realize that the problem wasn't me being insecure. It was her not knowing how to be alone. But mostly, I hoped I'd stop thinking about her soon. Stop wondering. Stop caring. I finished my coffee, brushed my teeth, climbed into the unfamiliar bed in my unfamiliar apartment, in my unfamiliar city. And I slept better than I had in months. 3 months into my Amsterdam life, I finally felt like I was finding my rhythm. I'd settled into the job at Hartman and Associates, thrown myself into it, really, working long hours on sustainable housing projects that actually mattered. My Dutch was improving slowly, more comprehension than speaking, but enough to navigate daily life without constantly pulling out my phone to translate. I'd found a permanent apartment in De Pijp, a neighborhood Marcus had been right to recommend. Young, vibrant, full of cafes, and the kind of energy that made me feel less alone. I'd bought a bike, and yes, I'd fallen into a canal. Marcus had been right about that too. I'd made friends with my coworkers, started joining them for Friday borrels at the pub near our office. I was becoming someone new. Not completely different from who I'd been. Still Daniel. Still the guy who cared too much and thought too hard. But a version of myself that wasn't constantly shrinking to fit someone else's needs. And I rarely thought about Emily anymore. Sure, there were moments. A song that had been our song. A couple laughing in a cafe the way we used to. The anniversary of our wedding passing. A day I spent entirely too drunk on Dutch beer, calling Marcus at 2 a.m. Amsterdam time to ramble about regret and relief in equal measure. But mostly, she was just someone I used to know. Someone who belonged to a chapter that was closed. Until my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon in early May. I was at my drafting table. I'd finally had my beloved table shipped over and set up in my new apartment's spare room, working on sketches for a green residential complex in Amsterdam Noord. My phone buzzed with a FaceTime call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me swipe to accept. And there was Emily. She looked different. Thinner, maybe. Her hair longer than she used to keep it. Sitting in what looked like a car, though I couldn't see much of the background. "Daniel?" Her voice cracked. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. But you have me blocked. Emily." I kept my voice neutral, but my heart was hammering. "How did you get this number?" I called your mom. I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have. But I needed to talk to you and... Daniel, I'm in Amsterdam." The world tilted. "You're what?" "I'm here, in Amsterdam. I flew in this morning. I've been trying to reach you for 2 months, trying to explain, trying to tell you that I understand now, that I was wrong about everything, that I want to fix this." "Emily, stop." I set down my pencil carefully, forcing myself to breathe. "Why are you in Amsterdam?" "Because you wouldn't answer my calls. Because I needed to see you, to talk to you face to face. Daniel, I ended things with Lucas. For real this time. I got therapy, actual therapy, not couples counseling. I worked through why I was so attached to him, why I couldn't let go, and I understand now. I understand everything you were trying to tell me. She was crying, tears streaming down her face, mascara running. I know I fucked up. I know I chose him over you again and again. And I know I made you feel invisible and small and like you didn't matter. But I'm different now. I've changed. And I came here to show you that. To prove that I can be what you needed me to be all along. I felt like I was watching this happen from outside my body. Emily in Amsterdam. Emily crying and apologizing and asking for another chance. Emily offering me everything I'd begged for 6 months ago. And I felt nothing. No, not nothing. I felt annoyed. I felt like my hard-won peace was being disrupted. I felt like she was intruding on a life she no longer had any claim to. "Where are you?" I asked. "I'm outside our apartment, the Boston one. I wanted to. I thought maybe we could meet there, somewhere familiar, and talk, really talk. I know you're in Amsterdam, but I thought maybe there was a chance you'd kept it, or..." "Emily, I haven't lived in that apartment since January. I told you that. I gave you the lease, remember?" "I know, but I thought..." "I'm here now, and I just knocked and... Daniel, there's a woman answering the door. She says she lives here. She says she's been renting it since March." Of course. The lease had been in Emily's name, but she'd been living with her mother since I'd left, avoiding the apartment and all its memories. She must have sublet it or broken the lease entirely. A new tenant would make sense. "Emily, I don't know what to tell you. That's not my apartment anymore. I live in Amsterdam now. You knew that. But I thought, I came here to find you, to work things out, and you're not even here. You're not even in the same country." Her voice was rising, panic creeping in. "How am I supposed to fix this if you're on another continent?" "You're not," I said quietly. "You're not supposed to fix this, Emily. It's over. It's been over since January." "No, no, Daniel, please. I love you. I know I didn't show it. I know I was a terrible wife. But I love you, and I can change. I have changed. Just give me a chance to prove it." I looked at her face on my screen. This woman I'd promised forever to. This woman I'd loved so much it had nearly destroyed me. This woman who was 3 months too late and a whole lifetime of understanding short of what I needed. "I'm glad you're in therapy," I said. "I'm glad you're working on yourself. I hope you figure out why you hold on to people who hurt you and push away people who love you. I really do." "But..." Her voice was small. "But I don't love you anymore, Emily. I don't want to fix this. I don't want to try again. I want you to go home and build a life that makes you happy. And I want to do the same here. And I want us both to accept that we weren't good for each other." She was sobbing now, full-body sobs that shook her whole frame. Part of me, a small part, the part that had loved her for 3 years, wanted to comfort her, wanted to tell her it would be okay, that she'd be fine, that someone else would love her the way she needed. But that wasn't my job anymore. "I have to go," I said. "I'm sorry you flew here. I'm sorry this isn't what you wanted to hear. But Emily, let me go, please. Let us both move on." "Daniel..." I ended the call. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. I felt like I'd been in a car accident. That same adrenaline, that same sense of unreality. Emily had come to Boston to find me, had shown up at our old apartment, had flown across an ocean chasing a relationship that had been dead for months. It should have felt satisfying, maybe. Validation that I'd been right to leave, that she'd finally understood too late. But it just felt sad. Sad for both of us, for the time we'd wasted, for the pain we'd caused each other. My phone rang again immediately. Emily calling back. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. I blocked the number. There was a text from my mom. Mijo, Emily asked me for your number. I gave it to her. I'm sorry if I shouldn't have, but she seemed so desperate. Are you okay? I'm okay, Mama. Thank you for warning me. She loves you, you know. She's just figuring that out too late. I know, but that's not my problem anymore. I set my phone face down on the drafting table and tried to return to my sketches, but my hands were still shaking too much. Instead, I walked to my window, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking a small park, and watched the city below. Amsterdam in May was beautiful. Trees in full bloom, people on cafe patios, the long northern daylight making everything feel possible. This was my life now. This city, this job, this version of myself that wasn't defined by someone else's needs. And Emily was in Boston, crying to a new tenant who probably thought she was crazy, realizing that I'd meant it when I said I was done. I waited for guilt to crash over me, for regret, for the voice that said I was giving up too easily, that I should have taken her call, that love means forgiveness and second chances and trying harder. But that voice was quiet now. Maybe it had learned, finally, that love also means knowing when to walk away, that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, that trying harder doesn't fix a relationship where only one person is trying at all. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is the woman from your old apartment. Your wife? Ex-wife? Just left. She seemed really upset. I didn't know what to tell her. I hope everything's okay. I stared at the message, trying to figure out how to respond. What did you say to a stranger who'd just witnessed the final implosion of your marriage? Thank you for letting me know. I'm sorry she bothered you. She didn't know you'd moved in. No worries. For what it's worth, she said you were making a mistake by leaving. But anyone who chases someone to another country and expects them to still be there, I don't think you're the one who made the mistake. I smiled despite myself. This stranger understood something Emily never had. That you can't force someone to stay. That love isn't about persistence when the other person is trying to leave. It's about respecting their choice, even when it hurts. Thank you, I typed. That means more than you know. I poured myself a Dutch gin, Genever, I'd learned to love it, and sat on my balcony watching the sun slowly set over Amsterdam. The sky turned pink and gold, the light soft and forgiving, the city settling into its evening rhythm. Somewhere across the Atlantic, Emily was probably boarding a plane home, or maybe she was sitting in a hotel room, crying, trying to understand how she'd lost something she hadn't realized she wanted until it was gone. I felt sorry for her. I really did. But I didn't want her back. That realization settled over me like peace. Not relief, not triumph, just simple, honest peace. I didn't want her back. I didn't want to try again. I didn't want to return to Boston and rebuild a marriage that had been broken long before I'd left. I wanted this. Amsterdam, my apartment, my job, my life. I wanted to keep becoming this version of myself, the one who set boundaries and kept them, who chose his own dreams over someone else's comfort. who understood that loving yourself sometimes means disappointing people who thought you'd always put them first. My phone buzzed one last time. Marcus. Em's mom just called me asking if I knew how to reach you. I played dumb. You good? I'm good. She found me. Called me while I was working. Turns out she flew to Boston and showed up at the old apartment. What the fuck? Yeah. What did you tell her? That it's over. That I don't want to fix it. That she needs to let me go. Brutal. How do you feel? I thought about it. Really thought about it. How did I feel? Free, I typed. I feel free. And I meant it. Summer arrived in Amsterdam, and with it, a version of myself I barely recognized. I'd been promoted at Hartman & Associates, lead architect on a major sustainable housing project in Amsterdam Oost. The kind of work I'd dreamed about in architecture school. The kind of project that would define a career too. Henrik had called me into his office in late June, a bottle of champagne already chilled. You've earned this, he'd said, pouring us both a glass. Your work on the Nord project was exceptional, but more than that, you understand what we're trying to build here. Not just buildings, but a better way of living. I'd gone home that night and stood on my balcony, looking out at the city that had become mine, and called my mom to tell her. She'd cried. Happy tears, proud tears, the kind of tears that said she'd known all along I'd needed to leave to find this. Your father would be so proud, she'd said, and I'd had to sit down because the grief was still there, still sharp, even 3 years after his death. He always said you were meant for something big. I'm glad you finally believed it. The truth was, I hadn't believed it when I was with Emily. I'd made myself small for so long that I'd forgotten I could be big, that I could take up space, that my dreams mattered as much as anyone else's. Amsterdam had taught me that. Or maybe I'd taught myself, and Amsterdam had just been the place where I'd had the space to learn. I'd made real friends now, not just work colleagues I grabbed drinks with, but actual friends. Marcia, a Dutch architect on my team who'd taken me under her wing and taught me how to navigate Dutch directness without taking offense. James, a British expat who'd been in Amsterdam for 5 years and knew all the best spots tourists never found. Yuki, a Japanese designer who worked in fashion but shared my love of obscure coffee shops and long conversations about art. We'd meet for borrels on Friday nights, brunch on Sundays, impromptu dinners when someone discovered a new restaurant. They knew I was divorced. I'd been honest about that from the beginning, but they didn't treat me like someone broken who needed fixing. They just treated me like Daniel, their friend who happened to be rebuilding his life. You're different, Marcia had observed one night over drinks. From when you first started, you smile more now. You seem lighter. I feel lighter. Good. Whatever you left behind in America, you were right to leave it. But I hadn't completely left it behind. Emily was still there, in the back of my mind, not as a presence but as a lesson. A reminder of what I wouldn't accept anymore, what I wouldn't settle for, who I wouldn't make myself small for. She'd tried to contact me a few times after the Amsterdam incident. Emails that I'd deleted without reading. A letter forwarded from my Boston address that I'd thrown away unopened. One last text from a new number before I blocked that too. I understand now. I hope you find happiness. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed. I hadn't responded. What was there to say? We'd said everything already, or failed to say it when it mattered. Either way, that chapter was closed. In early August, I met Sophie. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic. No eyes meeting across a crowded room. No instant recognition of soulmates. Just a woman at a coffee shop in De Pipe, reading a book I'd loved, and me asking if she'd recommend it, even though I'd already read it twice. Are you seriously asking me about a book you've clearly already read just to start a conversation? She'd asked, looking up with amusement in her green eyes. Is it working? Depends. Do you actually want to talk about the book? Or are you just trying to get my number? Can't it be both? She'd laughed, and we'd ended up talking for 2 hours about books and Amsterdam and the art of starting over. She was Dutch, but had lived in New York for 3 years before moving back. She understood what it was like to be caught between two versions of yourself, two countries, two lives. We went on a few dates, coffee, dinner, a museum, a bike ride along the canals. It was easy and light and fun in a way that dating Emily had never been. No games, no wondering if I was doing enough, no feeling like I had to compete for her attention. I'm not looking for anything serious, I told her on our 4th date, wanting to be honest. I'm still figuring out who I am outside of my marriage. Good, she'd said, because I'm not looking for serious either. I'm looking for someone who makes me laugh and doesn't take themselves too seriously and can hold a conversation about something other than crypto or startups. We kept it casual, seeing each other once or twice a week. No pressure, no expectations. Sometimes we'd have sex, sometimes we'd just hang out and talk. She had her own life, her own friends, her own interests. She didn't need me to complete her, and I didn't need her to validate me. It was refreshing. It was healthy. It was everything my relationship with Emily hadn't been. You're different now, Sophie observed one night, lying in my bed, tracing patterns on my chest. Then when we first met, more relaxed. Less like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Am I? You are. It's good. Whatever you were afraid of, I think you're figuring out it's not going to happen. She was right. I'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for Sophie to suddenly need more than I could give, to demand I choose between my dreams and her, to make me feel small again. But she didn't. She just enjoyed my company when I was around and lived her life when I wasn't. It felt revolutionary. Work consumed most of my time anyway. The Oost project was massive, a 100-unit residential complex designed with sustainability at its core. Green roofs, solar panels, rainwater collection, communal gardens. It was everything I believed architecture could be, and I threw myself into it with the kind of passion I'd forgotten I had. Henrik noticed. You're on fire lately, he said, reviewing my latest designs. I don't know what's gotten into you, but keep it up. This is career-defining work. What had gotten into me was simple. I was finally doing what I wanted, the way I wanted, without apologizing for it. I was finally taking up space. My mom flew out to visit in September, her first time in Europe. I showed her around Amsterdam, the museums and canals and coffee shops, the office where I worked, the apartment I'd made into a home. She met my friends, charmed them all with her warmth and her terrible Dutch pronunciation. Mijo, she said on her last night, sitting on my balcony with wine and stroopwafels. You look happy. Really happy. I am. I'm glad you left. I know that's a terrible thing for a mother to say about her son's marriage, but I'm glad. She wasn't right for you, or maybe you weren't right for her. Either way, you're better now. Do you think I gave up too easily? She considered the question seriously. I think you held on longer than most people would have. I think you tried everything you could, and she didn't meet you halfway. That's not giving up, Daniel. That's accepting reality. I loved her, you know. I really did. I know. But love isn't enough if the other person isn't willing to do the work. And from what you've told me, you were doing all the work. She was right. I had been. For months, maybe years, I'd been the only one fighting for us. The only one making sacrifices, setting aside dreams, trying to make it work. But I wasn't fighting anymore. I was building instead, building a life, a career, a version of myself that wasn't defined by someone else's needs. And it felt good. No, it felt better than good. It felt right. Sophie and I ended things in October, amicably and without drama. She'd met someone she wanted to explore something more serious with, and I was genuinely happy for her. We hugged, promised to stay friends, and actually meant it. Thank you, she said, for being exactly what I needed when I needed it. Right back at you. After she left, I sat on my balcony and realized I felt fine. Not hurt, not rejected, not like I'd lost something important. Just fine. Content with what we'd had for what it was. A brief, pleasant interlude. A reminder that relationships could be easy and healthy and end without destruction. Not everything had to be Emily. Not everything had to hurt. Marcia set me up on a few dates after that. Friends of friends, women she thought I'd like. Most of them were fine. Nice, attractive, successful women who checked all the boxes on paper. But I found myself comparing them all to Emily. Not in the way you'd think. Not wishing they were more like her, but making sure they weren't. Did she respect my time? Did she listen when I talked? Did she have her own interests? Or was she looking for someone to complete her? Did she make me feel bigger or smaller? I was learning to vet for red flags I'd ignored the first time around. By November, I'd been in Amsterdam for 10 months. Almost a year of this new life. I'd worked on projects I was proud of, made friends who actually knew me, dated without losing myself, learned enough Dutch to get by without constantly apologizing for my pronunciation. I'd become someone new, or maybe I'd just remembered who I'd been before I'd made myself small enough to fit in Emily's world. One night, scrolling through my phone, I came across old photos I'd forgotten to delete. Our wedding, honeymoon, Christmases and birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays that had once felt like building a life. I looked at my face in those photos, smiling, happy, in love. That person seemed like a stranger now, someone who didn't know what was coming, someone who believed that love and effort were enough. I didn't miss him. I didn't miss that innocence or that relationship or that version of myself who thought he could love someone into loving him back the way he needed. I deleted the photos, all of them, not out of anger or bitterness, but because they belonged to a story that was over. A chapter I'd closed. And I was ready to start writing the next one. It was Henrik who told me, almost exactly a year after I'd moved to Amsterdam. We were in his office reviewing the final designs for the Oost project when his phone rang. He glanced at it, frowned, answered in Dutch. I could only catch a few words. My Dutch was better, but still not fluent enough for rapid-fire phone conversations. When he hung up, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "That was interesting," he said. "Do you remember Emily? Your ex-wife?" My stomach dropped. "What about her?" She apparently reached out to our HR department, asking about you, whether you still work here, if we could forward a message. What did they tell her? Nothing. HR policy. We don't confirm or deny employment for privacy reasons. But they flagged it to me because she mentioned you by name. He paused. Do you want me to forward whatever she wanted to say? I thought about it. A year ago, hell, 6 months ago, I might have said yes out of curiosity or guilt or some misplaced sense of obligation. But now? No, I said. Whatever she has to say, I don't need to hear it. Henrik nodded, unsurprised. Good. You're doing excellent work here, Daniel. The last thing you need is drama from your past disrupting your focus. After the meeting, I walked along the canal near our office, trying to process the fact that Emily was still trying to reach me a year later. What could she possibly want? Closure? Another chance to apologize? To tell me she'd been right all along? It didn't matter. I'd built a whole new life in the space she used to occupy, and she didn't get to intrude on it just because she finally felt ready to have the conversation I'd been trying to have for months before I left. My phone rang. Marcus, right on cue. We'd fallen into a pattern of weekly calls, maintaining our friendship across the ocean. You busy? He asked. Just walking. What's up? So I have news. Teresa and I are getting married in Amsterdam next summer. And before you say anything, yes, we're doing it there specifically, so you have to be there. No excuses about being too busy or flights being expensive. I laughed. I wouldn't miss it. Good. Because you're my best man, obviously. I need you to make sure I don't fuck up my vows in front of 100 people. You're going to be great. And congratulations, man. I'm really happy for you guys. How are you doing? Really doing? I'm good. Really good, actually. Emily tried to contact me through work today. What the fuck? A year later? Yeah. What did she want? I don't know. I told them not to forward whatever she sent. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm proud of you. Old Daniel would have read it, probably would have responded, definitely would have let it mess with his head for a week. Old Daniel was an idiot. Old Daniel was in love. There's a difference. But I'm glad you're past it. Me too. After we hung up, I kept walking, ending up at a small cafe I'd discovered months ago. I ordered my usual, black coffee and an appelgebach that was slowly destroying my gym routine, and pulled out my sketchbook. I'd started drawing again, something I'd abandoned years ago when work and marriage had consumed all my creative energy. Nothing serious, just idle sketches, buildings I wanted to design, scenes from around Amsterdam, faces of people I'd met. I was sketching the canal across from the cafe when someone sat down at the table next to mine. I glanced up out of habit and froze. It was her. It was Emily. She looked different, older somehow, though it had only been a year. Her hair was shorter, styled differently. She wore clothes I didn't recognize, a confidence in her posture that seemed new or maybe just rediscovered, and she was staring right at me. Daniel, she breathed. I thought that was you. I saw you through the window and I thought, I wasn't sure, but my heart was hammering, but my voice came out steady. Emily, what are you doing in Amsterdam? I moved here 3 months ago. I got a job transfer and I thought maybe we could. She trailed off, and I realized with a strange sense of detachment that she'd orchestrated this. The message to my work had been a test, a way to confirm I was still here. And now she'd, coincidentally, ended up at a cafe near my office. You moved here. I repeated flatly. To Amsterdam, where I live. I know it seems crazy, but Daniel, I needed a fresh start too. Boston had too many memories, and when this opportunity came up, I thought maybe it was fate. Maybe we were supposed to… No. I closed my sketchbook, started gathering my things. No, Emily. We're not supposed to anything. Please, just hear me out. I know I messed up. I know I chose Lucas over you. I know I made you feel invisible and small and like you didn't matter. But I've changed. I've been in therapy for a year. I've worked through why I was so attached to him, why I couldn't let go. And I understand now. I understand everything you were trying to tell me. She reached across the space between our tables, not quite touching me, but close enough that I could feel the intention. I love you, Daniel. I never stopped loving you. And I came here because I wanted a chance to prove that I can be what you needed me to be all along. I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd once been my whole world, who I'd made myself small for, who I'd loved so much it had nearly destroyed me. This woman who'd shown up in my new city, in my new life. Expecting what? That I'd been waiting. That I'd forgive and forget and take her back. Emily, I said quietly, I don't love you anymore. Her face crumpled. You don't mean that. I do, I'm sorry, but I do. I loved you once so much. But that love died somewhere between the 100 times you chose Lucas over me and the moment I finally chose myself, and I'm not interested in resurrecting it. But we could start over. Fresh start, new city, none of the baggage from before. We could be different people here. I am a different person here. That's the point. I'm the person I couldn't be when I was with you, constantly making myself smaller so you'd have room for him. And I like who I am now. I'm not giving that up. I stood, leaving money on the table for my coffee. I'm glad you're in therapy. I'm glad you're working on yourself. But you need to do that for you, not for me, not for us. There is no us anymore. Daniel, please, don't contact me again, Emily. Don't show up at my work. Don't coincidentally find me at cafes. Don't try to insert yourself into my life. I've moved on. You need to do the same. I walked out before she could respond, my hands shaking, but my steps steady. I could feel her watching me through the window, could imagine the tears, the devastation, the shock that I'd actually meant it when I said I was done. But I kept walking, back to my office where I threw myself into work for the rest of the day. Back to my apartment, where I stood on my balcony and let the reality of it wash over me. Back to my life, the one I'd built without her, the one she had no place in. That night, I called my sister. She's here, I said without preamble. Emily moved to Amsterdam. What? Yeah, showed up at a cafe near my office today. Said she got a job transfer, wanted a fresh start, thought maybe we could try again. Please tell me you told her to fuck off. More or less. I told her I don't love her anymore and to leave me alone. Good. Jesus, Daniel. That's stalker behavior. She moved to a foreign country to chase you? Apparently. Are you okay? I thought about it. Was I okay? I'd just seen my ex-wife for the first time in a year. The woman I'd once promised forever to. The woman who'd broken my heart so thoroughly I'd fled to another continent. I'd told her I didn't love her anymore, watched her face crumple, and walked away. And I felt fine. Not angry, Not hurt, not tempted, just fine. Yeah, I said. I actually am. You're not going to take her back? Not even a little bit tempted? Not even a little bit. Then you really are over her. The old Daniel would have at least considered it. The old Daniel was an idiot who thought love meant setting himself on fire to keep someone else warm. And the new Daniel? The new Daniel knows better. We talked for another hour, Carla filling me in on family drama and her new job, and the guy she'd started dating. Normal sibling conversation. The kind we used to have before my marriage had consumed all my emotional energy. It felt good. It felt right. After we hung up, I made myself dinner, stir-fry with vegetables from the market, rice from the Asian grocery down the street, and ate on my balcony watching the sun set over Amsterdam. This city had given me everything. A career I loved, friends who saw me, the space to become myself again, the courage to walk away from someone who kept choosing me second. And now Emily was here, trying to claim a piece of it, trying to insert herself into a life she'd had no part in building. But she didn't get to do that. She didn't get to move here and expect me to welcome her with open arms. She didn't get to decide that a year of therapy made up for years of choosing someone else. I'd meant what I said. I didn't love her anymore. And more than that, I didn't want to love her anymore. I didn't want to go back to being that version of myself who begged for crumbs and called it a feast. I didn't want to wonder if I was enough, if she was thinking about Lucas, if I should just be grateful she chose to stay. I wanted what I had now. This life, this version of myself, this peace. My phone buzzed with an email from Henrik. Great work on the revisions. You're presenting to the city council next week. Are you ready? I smiled and typed back. Born ready. This was my life now. Presenting to city councils, building sustainable housing, making a difference in ways that mattered, being someone who took up space without apologizing for it. Emily could have Amsterdam too, I supposed. It was a big enough city for both of us. But she couldn't have me. That chapter was closed, and I'd thrown away the key. I finished my dinner and went inside, pulling out my laptop to work on my presentation. Outside my windows, Amsterdam glittered in the gathering darkness. Canals and bridges and bicycles. A city that had become mine. A life that belonged only to me. And somewhere in this same city, Emily was probably crying. Probably wondering how we'd gotten here. Probably texting Lucas to tell him I'd rejected her again. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I'd chosen myself. And I'd choose myself again tomorrow. And the day after that. And every day after for the rest of my life. Because I'd learned the hardest lesson. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes the bravest thing is choosing your own happiness over someone else's. Sometimes the person you need to rescue is yourself. And I had. I'd rescued myself from a marriage that was slowly killing me, from a woman who loved me but not enough, from a version of myself I'd never want to be again. I'd boarded a plane to Amsterdam, not knowing if I'd survive the landing. But I'd done more than survive. I'd learned to fly. The end. Epilogue. 2 years later, I stood in front of a completed building in Amsterdam Oost, watching families move into the sustainable housing complex I'd designed. Children running through communal gardens, solar panels gleaming in the sunlight, green roofs hosting urban gardens where residents could grow their own vegetables. It was everything I'd dreamed of building. Henrik stood beside me, grinning. You should be proud, Daniel. This is going to change how people think about urban housing. We did it together. No, you did this. I just gave you the space to do it. Space, that's what it had all been about, really. Having the space to be myself, to dream big, to build something that mattered without making myself small enough to fit someone else's vision. I'd heard through mutual connections that Emily had moved back to Boston after 6 months in Amsterdam. That she and Lucas had finally tried dating, and it had lasted all of 3 months. That she'd told people I'd been the one who got away. The one who'd actually loved her. The one she'd let go too easily. I felt sorry for her, in a distant way. Sorry that she'd had to lose me to learn what she'd had. Sorry that she'd realized too late what I'd been trying to tell her all along. But I didn't regret leaving. I didn't regret choosing myself. I didn't regret any of it. Because standing here, watching children play in gardens I'd designed, knowing I'd built something that would outlast all that heartbreak, this was worth it. This was everything. My phone buzzed. A message from Amélie, the French landscape architect I'd been seeing for 6 months. Dinner tonight? I found a new place in Jordan that does incredible moules frites. I smiled and typed back, "Perfect. See you at 8." This was my life now. Building things that mattered. Dating someone who had her own dreams and didn't need me to abandon mine. Living in a city I loved, doing work I believed in, being exactly who I wanted to be. It had taken leaving everything behind to find it. But I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because sometimes the only way to find yourself is to walk away from everyone who needs you to be someone else. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust that you're worth choosing. I'd chosen myself, and I'd never looked back.